The freshest fresh stream.
How fresh?
That's up to you, lady. There's this store in the Pacific Northwest. I think it's just in Washington, actually. I've never seen it in Oregon. It's called Grocery Outlet. Most people call it Gross Out.
Yeah.
And there was one, or is one, in Olympia. Mm-hmm. And one day I was driving around out on the streets. Mm-hmm. There's not really many pretty women in Olympia, so my hand was underused.
Oh, okay.
And they said, Grocery Outlet, now selling the freshest fresh meat. And I just imagined that they just had a bunch of cattle in there.
They're just killing them right there?
Yeah, you bring you in.
Slaughter to order.
Yeah, give you a chainsaw and
Yikes.
Go for it. But you can't really eat flesh right off the cow, right? Don't you have to let it sit for a while?
I don't know.
You've never been into that?
No, not an expert on meat harvesting.
Meat harvesting. Mm. Who were we talking about the lab-grown meats?
Was that with John?
Was it John? Yeah.
Yeah.
My friend John came over. Mm-hmm. They just kind of like stimulate.
Like they basically are growing a big tumor.
Well,
and then you're eating the tumor.
Yeah, basically.
If you eat lab-grown meat.
Yeah, just like it twitches and it grows.
Yeah. They're like electrocuting it and causing it to expand, and it's super grotesque.
Is it?
I think.
Does that perturb you?
Yeah. A bit.
What's the difference between perturbation and disturb and perturb?
Oh, well, that's a good question.
Do you know off the top of your head?
No. Disturb. What does turb mean?
Turb?
What's the root? Where's that? Where's my etymology book?
It's right on the tuffet.
Should I go grab it?
The divan.
Okay.
Do you
BRB.
prefer? Are they the same thing? The divan and the tuffet. Ottoman. And
tuffet.
Divan is a cover for your blanket.
Isn't a divan? No, that's a duvet.
Oh, okay.
A divan. I think isn't it like one of those loungy? What are they called?
A loungy thing?
Like those.
Oh, fainting couch.
Yeah. It's kind of like that.
A chaise lounge.
Chaise, yeah.
So you're looking up turb?
Perturb, disturb. Let me look up disturb.
So, hello. It's Sunday, 10:30 Pacific time on the 17th of November. We're a week away, I think, or maybe 2 weeks away from Thanksgiving.
Yeah, we're really close.
Yeah.
And it's hard Thanksgiving for a lot of people right now.
Why?
With all the family business, with all the press telling the people who voted for Harris that they should cut out their family if they voted for Trump.
Have you ever cut out your family? Like a twitching tumor?
Turbid is the root. Disturb, perturbation, C turbid. Okay. So that's going to be the root.
She's looking up disturb and preturb. Or perturb? Perturbations? Because perturbations is something, but you don't have disturbations. That sounds like
think you do.
something
I don't have disturbations. Maybe you have
alone in the dark.
Turbid.
What's going on over there? It's disturbating.
Oh. Look what comes up. Masturbate. Turbid.
So
turbid, whence turbidity, turbulence, turbulent.
Yeah.
Trouble. It means trouble.
Obvious turb. A crowd indicates... Agitation, yeah.
Wow, either a crowd either in motion or in disorder.
Turbe, confusion, disorder, tumult. Okay, so some sort of like perturbation on the water, like there's some sort of
Very interesting.
disturbance. Yeah, cool. What disturbs you?
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, I guess lots of things disturb me.
What are you most disturbed about recently? Was it dating age discourse?
So perturbare, the Latin, to confuse thoroughly. So perturb would be about confusion.
Oh, to confuse. Okay, and disturb is about rifling.
And disturbare, to confuse by disruption.
Okay, so something disrupting.
So it's
confusing.
something being influenced. That's interesting. I have to spend more time on that.
Okay,
Very interesting.
Yeah, so a lot of people are quitting family. A lot of people have been quitting Twitter.
Oh, really?
They're going to this place called Blue Sky.
I saw a post about that.
And
what is that?
Blue Sky, it's like a Twitter knockoff, and it's for the lefties.
Is it blue because of the symbolism of blue with the Democratic?
I think that's part of it,
Okay.
but also the symbol is a butterfly in the same color of Twitter's old logo, the blue Tweety thing. Yeah. So I don't know what you do when you write on Blue Sky. Is it a sky?
Oh,
Are you skiting?
skiting.
Too close to Skype, right? But anyway, so Blue Sky
Maybe
is
it's-
like getting like 1 million people a day going over there and checking it out. And you scroll through it and it's just a bunch of like Dems. But they're eating themselves already. There's like 24,000 complaints per day or per hour or something like that.
People just like
They're really
complaining about each other's posts?
Yeah, they're complaining about each other's posts.
Oh, so
You know,
it's
some of
just
it's aggravated child
hyper-monitored.
exploitation material.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, yeah, you're gonna find that wherever the internet is, but
Oh, wow, that's awful.
but it looks like they're already going into a purity spiral. And you can type in "there are 2 genders" and you'll be automatically blocked from
Oh
the
my
platform.
gosh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, there are only 2 genders. Yeah, if you say that. So it'll
Well,
be interesting.
I've made some reports on Twitter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I get porn all the time.
Oh,
shown to
yeah,
me.
okay, porn,
I'm not
yeah.
somebody who's ever looked it up. There's no porn history in any of my browsers ever. It's not going to be something that it's like just feeding me back a thing that I am looking for. But I was just talking to somebody about this the other day, so maybe this is redundant, but I found out that you can turn off the auto scroll so that they recently made a feature on Twitter where the next video just automatically starts showing.
Yeah.
And I made a post about this like last week, complaining that the auto scroll would forward me to porn. So I'd be watching a video that I selected to watch,
yeah.
and then the very next video would be, full frontal nudity or something like that, and I'd be like,
I don't get
why
any of
is
that.
it doing that to me? I don't. Maybe I've written about porn in a critical way. I don't know if that selects it to come in.
Yeah.
But it kind of bothers me that these platforms allow that kind of material on them. I don't know what's to be done about that.
Oh, this is a cool story. Clem62 says, "Hey everyone, on my new phone because I drove off with mine on roof of my car and it was run over a million times." Jeez.
That's so
That's a
sad.
pretty cool like after action report. Like the phone is registering the number of people.
That might just be a description.
Oh, you don't
I
think
don't know
that-
if it's like
you don't think that
if
that's-
there's like some place where it reports every time it's hit by a car.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you know what the iPhone, the best iPhone function that they took away was a 3D touch where you could pressure down on it, and it was always so nice. And then they took it away because it was like costing them like pennies to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
And then they added this stupid thing where you touch it and then it wants to change your background.
Yeah, maybe you can turn that off.
I wish I could.
We should probably get deep somehow.
Oh yeah, we've been
Yeah.
shallow.
So
It's
yeah,
been the shallow end.
yeah, that's fine. I mean,
We
people
swim
probably
we
just.
swim on one side of the pool before we can go swim.
Do we wade? Are we wading?
Just dive in,
Wade?
wade.
I wonder if there's a.
Oh, do you want me to look that up?
No, you don't have to. Somebody said trad wife equals paper dictionary or paper dictionary equals trad wife. Like you're very trad there.
It's not
She
a
hates
dictionary.
porn and she loves.
Well, I guess it is. It's an etymological dictionary. I've had this for years, and it's fun. I love etymology.
Yeah. I don't know to what extent the so-called left is actively cutting out people from their family. I know it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's happening from the other end. And we've talked about this, and I wonder what it is about the headspace of the so-called left that is that frail right now. I think it's really fascinating to see just how scared and fearful their core base has become.
Well, you saw the campaign that they ran. It was terrifying. I mean, they really did convince people that their rights were going to be taken away, that women would be, that women's reproductive health care would be completely forsaken out of an ideological desire to reject anything abortion adjacent, including miscarriage. I mean, it's a miscarriage is a spontaneous abortion. So women were being terrorized to think that if Trump gets into office, all of your pregnancy complications are going to be ignored and you're going to be left to die. There were actually ads about that. This woman is having a miscarriage. Did you see that ad? There was one.
Didn't
the
we
woman
talk
is
about
written
that?
on the floor. Did we? We might have.
Yeah, we talked about
we
like
might have
those.
talked about
Yeah,
it.
we did. We talked about those
Yeah.
weird,
Yeah.
their focus on reproductive freedom.
But I talked about this in another conversation the other day. But
Yeah.
the women at my pottery studio, when they were talking about their votes, were citing fear that, one of them said, I had a DNC once. It wasn't an abortion, but I had to have a DNC. I'm terrified.
What's that? A do not
that's
conceptualize?
A dilation and cuterage. Cuterage.
You're my incuterage.
Well, thank you.
I'm going to incuterage you.
Ew.
You cutie.
It's like cutting things.
You're my cutie.
Okay. You're pretty cute yourself.
Oh, or is it cutting?
I like that on you.
Cutie?
That's better.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's the procedure where basically they go in and open your uterus and clean it out. And so this is what is done during an abortion. At least the early stage abortions, that's what they do. But it's also what they do after a miscarriage. I had a miscarriage when I was 14. I guess I was 16 weeks pregnant.
Oh, okay.
Not 14 years old.
Wow.
No,
Whoa.
That's a big piece of history. You'd know that by now if that were the case.
Well, some people's history comes out later, as we said earlier. We don't have to talk about that.
Oh, do you want to talk about that?
We don't
That's
have to
really
talk
interesting.
About it. Yeah, no, not until we talk
Even
about
in
people.
a generic way?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to touch that one.
Okay. But, well, and to whom, right? Who does it come out later to?
Yeah. The internet? Or the partner? Or...
Who needs to know those things about a person?
Yeah. DNC.
But anyway, well.
Okay, so this
putting
woman...
that on the sidebar. I had a DNC after that miscarriage because I hemorrhaged during the miscarriage. I had what they call a missed miscarriage, where I went in for an ultrasound just to do a pregnancy check. It was a wanted pregnancy, wanted a baby. It was after Julian and was going to have another baby. And at my second trimester ultrasound, it was discovered that the baby had no heartbeat. So the baby had died. Oh. And this was really...
How old? Oh, you said 14 weeks.
I was 14 weeks at that point.
4 months or
something. That's, 3.5. I waited to miscarry on my own because I was given my options were you can have a DNC.
Okay, where they come in
and clean everything out.
Yeah.
Or you can miscarry on your own. So I decided to miscarry on my own. It took a couple of weeks. And so this was a really hard, weird kind of purgatory to be in. Yeah. And then when I did miscarry, I hemorrhaged and it was really bad. So they ended up having to do a DNC anyway. Okay. But so this woman's saying, I had to have a DNC once and I'm scared that I'm going to lose, that someone like that in that position would lose her rights and not be taken care of. Another woman said in that conversation, yes, I had a friend who had an ectopic pregnancy and that terrifies me that she wouldn't be taken care of. And so these are just normal women, smart, nice, kind women that I've been working with. I've been doing pottery for a few months. And so these women are in all these conversations, they're intelligent people and they're scared. They weren't trying to propagandize anybody else. They were talking after the fact on election night about why they voted the way that they did. So they were believing the rhetoric that you will be left to die if you're a woman and you have pregnancy-related problems, and it has anything to do with procedures that relate to abortion or helping with the termination of a pregnancy. And I'm not talking about the killing of the life. I'm talking about the cleaning out of the body or anything. Even if the baby's already dead or has definitely no chance of survival, your life is going to be forfeit because the politicians are so ideologically possessed when it comes to the topic of abortion. So I do think that people were really scared. I think that they were given reason to be scared. They were told by people that they trusted that they should be scared. And that's what I found so irresponsible about that campaign. It was all really next level fear. So
I don't know if people calm down or if there's probably some sort of dopamine receptor habituation where people are kind of locked into thinking that way. But it doesn't seem like there's hardly the amount of protestation, of pussy hat wearing marches, of running down the street yelling F Donald Trump. There's just not that anymore. But there is a core group of people who still believe.
People are starting to feel kind of helpless and scared about it. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's the same passionate response that we saw
And
For
you
sure.
never cut anybody out of your life because of politics.
Did I ever cut anybody out of my life because of politics? I don't think so. Is that what is that called? ASMR?
Oh, I had to finish the story about the phone.
The phone?
Clem62. I backtracked and while stopped at the intersection, he backtracked and grabbed it.
Good.
Why couldn't I say that
Well.
sentence? He backtracked and grabbed it. Yeah.
No, I don't think I've ever cut anybody out over politics.
No?
No.
Have you
I
ever
mean,
been cut out by politics?
Have I? No. Well, almost. I had family that didn't want to talk to me because of my stance on the COVID vaccine,
Yeah.
which I think is politics.
Yeah, that's very political.
I didn't lose touch altogether, though. I just felt
Stymied.
sidelined and ignored. And there was the threat: if we're going to have to talk about this, we're risking our relationship.
Yeah.
But no, my best friend when I was, Stacy, my BFF. We met when I was 21, and she's 5 years older than me, so she would have been 26, and we both had babies, the same age, and we became really good friends right away, and are still close all these years later. So what, 27 years later, and she was a very conservative Christian Republican, and I was very much on the left-wing Democrat. And we would argue about it sometimes, but we pretty much just decided early to agree to disagree and put that aside, that we had much more in common than what we had to fight about. And our relationship didn't need to be about politics. So she's, it took both of us being patient with each other, I think, and just accepting that there's things about this other person that I don't agree with. Their values on some things, but there's so much more to a person than just political views.
Yeah, speaking of that, 2 years ago, you started a YouTube channel. Just about. I mean, it was probably 2 years and a month ago. When was that, your first video?
October 19th,
October 19th.
2022, right?
2022.
Yeah.
And when did you start doing more interview stuff, less just talking head stuff? Or
The very first one that I did, I started getting a bunch of correspondence right away. And I would get messages from counselors and psychologists and psychology faculty and graduate students and people who had felt like their counselor pushed them in these kind of political ways, these ideological ways. And so I started to invite people to record with me if they wanted to. And the very first one I did was with a girl named Katie, who was a graduate student. And I think I'm going to catch up with her and re-interview her
good.
soon. But I guess that would have been in sometime a month or so after
So about November 17th or so.
Yeah.
We had our first interview. Was I one of your first interviews beyond your channel?
My first interview that I did was with Stephanie Wynn for her Some Therapist podcast. We already had that lined up before I put out my YouTube video.
Oh.
We had it scheduled.
How did you
for a while.
contact her?
I knew her through CTA, Critical Therapy.
Okay,
Antidote.
yeah. So you had been kind of on the beat.
Oh yeah, I'd been kind of connected to all these people. I had had a conversation a couple months before with James Esses. He had a similar issue in his graduate program in England.
Yeah.
And so I had a call with him where I was asking him questions about how I was trying to make a decision about staying or leaving the program.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to make a decision about putting it on YouTube. I hadn't really thought about doing that. That was spontaneous and born of extreme frustration with my program.
Because you were getting nowhere.
I was absolutely getting nowhere. I was getting the complete runaround, and what they were doing was so unethical. And it really disgusted me. And so in a moment of absolute frustration, I recorded this video, and I made the first iteration of that and sent it to some friends at CTA, and then got critiques. And I scaled it back, and I was like, this is the shortest I can make it. It's 8 minutes. Okay, so I'll put that out because I didn't have a YouTube channel. I didn't have any kind of presence, and I wanted this to be seen by people. I wanted people to realize what was going on.
Yeah.
So,
What have you learned being a public figure?
I don't know if I'm a public figure.
You are literally posting videos on YouTube and getting anywhere between 600 and 600,000 views. So, what have you learned as an interviewer, as a communicator? How has the internet shaped or reshaped your priorities with regard to what makes sense in the world, right? Like,
It's weird. It's strange to be. It's hard to keep in your head all the different people that you're communicating with, because you also don't. You can't possibly know that people are. You know,
okay,
when
the
you're
black
talking,
box of the audience.
the black box of the audience. I
Yeah.
guess that's a good way to put it. Yeah, if you're communicating just to one person or a couple of people or even to a room full of people, you can kind of look at who you're talking with and you can gauge what they think a little bit by their feedback that they give you. But talking to who knows who you're talking to, people
Yeah.
who are going to agree with you, disagree with you, all of the things, that's really strange. And it's hard to hold that in my mind, what that communication, the breadth of that really is. It's strange to be open about things and your thought process publicly in front of people and feel like you're oversharing sometimes, and then other times where you find yourself holding back. That's me anyway. I don't know what any. I guess I should say I feel and not phrase this as the second person, but I have really benefited from all of the philosophical conversations I've been able to have with people. All of these really intelligent and thoughtful people that I've gotten to talk with, and the audience too. I love the live streams because the chat is a present feature, and I can keep an eye on the chat and bring what people are saying into the conversation. And it's really, I think it's such a cool medium, you know? So, I don't know. And I got a husband out of it.
Oh, you did? Did
Yeah,
you?
I did.
The internet.
Yes, you were the third person that interviewed me.
Wait, SS has a channel?
No,
Okay.
I didn't interview with Estes.
Okay,
Oh,
so
I actually
Stephanie
interviewed
Wynn-
him on my channel.
Yeah, but you said Stephanie Wynn.
Stephanie Wynn, and then a guy named Daniel Bobinski, who has this program called Keep the Republic.
Yeah, I had to take
kind of a-
Bobinski out of the running with you. I had to
No, he's a really lovely man.
kind of do a hit job on his reputation, so he wouldn't, stymie my
Oh, gosh.
pursuit.
No, he's a lovely person.
Okay.
He's a wonderful person.
Well, yeah, now that he's
He
out
has
of his
a-
way, I don't have
Yeah,
a
he
problem.
knew it wasn't like that ever. My goodness.
Yeah.
He's a happily married man and
Okay.
very, very good. He's a right wing guy, and he interviewed me. He's got an Idaho radio show.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So he was fabulously supportive too. We're just a really nice man.
I think I have a hard time interacting with the so-called left, and I say the so-called left because I don't really understand what I'm talking about. So it's just a bunch of group of people that are basically my political opponents, not necessarily like my enemies per se, but my opponents on a number of issues, and they kind of have their own ecosystem of communication. And I don't really interview them. I don't really interact with them. I peek in what they're doing. They just don't make sense to me. I'm like, it's like mildly upsetting or kind of perturbing, actually, because it's like,
Confusing.
well, yeah, there's just like, why do you believe what you believe? And so I don't really understand where they're going, but I studied it from, the point of view of Evergreen. I was immersed in that for a really long time. So I kind of have been in their circles and studied them, kind of as an insider outsider or an outsider insider. but I don't know how to make any judgments that are accurate about the openness of communication in there, what kind of edification people get from that. I do, and every once in a while clips will surface of them acting ridiculous, but I'm sure that from their point of view, that somebody in my position who would be over there would look at the right wing doing really crazy things and behaving in crazy ways and kind of have this truncated viewpoint on what they're doing. So that just goes to say that from my point of view, I feel like I'm able to be really open and that I have a lot of connections that I can make with a lot of different people. As long as I don't tread too spicily on certain topics, that does tend to shut certain people off, people who are kind of post regime. The very demure people who really believe in polite society, and don't want to like dirty their noses or anything like that. And I try not to be too spicy, but
tread spicily.
Yeah, not tread too spicily, but at the same time, there's a freedom of communication that I enjoy that I don't know if people on the left necessarily enjoy or not.
What do you mean when you say people on the left? I'm trying to picture what you're talking about because, I mean, like, I think both of our parents, our families would be Democrat voters. Is that what you mean? Do you mean Democrat voters or do you mean like people?
Well, people who are active in the communication
like
sphere, the people who are actively engaged in the media, not necessarily people who are just consuming the mainstream gobbledygook, which is basically leftist, unless you go to like the neocon kind of Fox stuff, and I don't even really watch Fox all that much. But the people who produce content on the left, I don't know to what extent they have to abide by certain sorts of purity rules with regard to communication. Like they can be spicy. They can say, like call Donald Trump or punch a Nazi or something like that. They can be spicy in certain ways, and I can be spicy in certain ways. And I get in trouble if I.
Do you think of yourself as being on the right?
I think I'm constitutionally a liberal, constitutionally even a shit lib to a certain degree, but
what does that mean?
That is a good question. I think about that. We had a meetup, centrist salon or like a dissidence den of discourse yesterday down the road here, and we met a lot of people who basically are not afraid to say openly in Washington State that they voted for Donald Trump and they're happy that he won.
I bet all of them didn't too. I bet some of them didn't.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Even though like that wasn't like the consensus that you had to do that, but people
that
were
it's
like,
okay to talk.
Yeah,
about
it's okay to talk about it. And you had an interaction with your little social club that you mentioned earlier, where you went, you kind of presented them a red flag in the form of a red hat with regard to who you voted for. And they were taken aback that you would admit that you voted for Donald Trump because they think that it's
that means I'm a bad person.
Your body, his choice,
right?
To go the groper route. But what was the question? So I was talking with one guy. You show up to these things, you're like, okay, I have to be social. All I want to do is play a board game this weekend, but I have to be social for the wife.
Dragged you out.
Yeah, like my wife takes me to these mandatory freedom fests, and I kind of like grin and bear it. And as long as I'm not too involved in some sort of project at home, I have the bandwidth to go. And you sit around and you kind of. You kind of talk, and then you finally get into like some sort of deepish discussion with this guy. I spoke with this guy, William. He talked about holism, like this philosophy of being able to see liberalism as one way of viewing the world, but there's other valid ways of viewing the world, and kind of being able to critique liberalism as a universalizing, totalizing, pathological even mythology that's based on the primacy of reason over everything else, basically. The universalism of this thing called human rights, whereas before and currently there are tons of other ways of looking at the world and ordering society that may not have the same amount of scientific advancement, And I spoke with this guy, this really nice guy, Rudyard. I can't remember his last name off the top of my head, but he runs the What If Alt Hist channel. And he's this 23-year-old. He's brilliant. He's so well read. And he's kind of in the right. He's okay with being associated with the right, but it's more about the right as this open kind of Wild West kind of tombstone kind of town on the frontier. And there's a lot of competing, grudges and discourses and some seedy behavior and then like entrepreneurialism. Like there's all this possibility over here on the right. And then the shitlib kind of walks into town because they got kicked out of like the Pinkerton city where everybody's being told what to say and what to do and being more and more illiberal. So the liberal goes to the Wild West town and then like shows up and says something and is disagreed with or laughed at or called by these words you're never supposed to say that their regime was protecting them from. It's funny, this word retard, quote unquote, which means late in
Slow.
French,
Retard,
slow,
yeah.
retard. It's becoming more and more mainstream. Like it's like being put front and center on a way to describe people. And so the impact of that word, the impact of that, there's all these 6-letter words. We used to have 4-letter words. Fuck, cunt, cock. Asshole doesn't really count, but the 4-letter word. But now they're all 6-letter word. The N word, the F word, the R word, retard. They're all these 6-letter words.
That's interesting.
That in the regime's kind of annal of discourse or Overton windows, like these are the bad words, and they're basically words that denigrate you based on your identity characteristics or assume that you are a lower caste. Like you're a lower class, you're either slower or you have an alternative sexuality or you're of a different race, So the shitlib comes in and encounters these ideas that from his point of view kind of mirror. I'm kind of evoking James Lindsay. In the right discourse, there are groups that utilize identity politics and are not ashamed of identity politics and see identity politics as a practical way of organizing society. Tribalism and just admitting that human beings are tribal, that we use a tribal lens in order to aggregate information because we're solitary beings and we form direct connections with people of our political tribe or our ethnic tribe or even our genetic tribe in order to function in the world. And so there are people, there are groups, and there's ideologies on the right that are not afraid of saying that, And the shitlib comes in disgusted with the Pinkerton city where there's this corrupt oligarchical order, and the shitlib is a liberal at heart, and it somewhere in that beating heart of their liberalism is a libertarianism, like is this desire for freedom of speech and freedom of conscience and freedom of association. But then you see these people freely associating and freely, in ways that are bad from the regime's point of view. And the liberal wants to walk into the shantytown or tombstone and clean it all up and say, no, you can't do that. You're acting this way. You're acting the right way. You're acting the wrong way. And so it's this person, it's really hard to give you a sense of what shitlib means. It's this kind of snooty, smug, like Bill Maher is like the epitome of like this kind of smug. He's going to call out the left for being retards,
Yeah.
But he's still going to call Donald Trump a fascist and still like use all their talking points when it suits him. So he'll play both sides against each other without really examining or being able or willing to examine in good faith, so-called, his opposition.
Could you not look at those two things as actually running a similar process, that the identity politics on the right versus the left? I went to this. I was at a workshop recently where one of the speakers presented on the characteristics of right-wing authoritarianism versus left-wing authoritarianism. And it was a long and nuanced talk. I wouldn't be able to sum it up in a way that would do it justice, but one of the things that he pointed out was that left-wing authoritarianism utilizes a lot of the same oppressor-oppressed discourse that the right-wing, that they both do, but in right-wing authoritarianism, it's characterized by an identification with the victor, with the strong, and sort of the left wing is an identification with the underdog. So they're kind of running the same script in a way. And so if you're this, I don't know, shitlib character who has a problem with the anti-individualism of that classification process, and you see that mirrored on one side versus the other, you're going to be calling it out equally from a position of, I don't like that process. I think that process leaves individuals at a loss, because that now we're all being classified and characterized based on a collectivist lens that's really reductionist at essence.
Well, I think part of the why shitlibs are called shitlibs and denigrated is because there is this unwillingness to admit that they want the authority themselves, and they want to mask authority in process. They want to mask authority in rationalism, but they don't want to admit that some people are more rational or more intellectual than others, or more smarter than others, or stronger than others. And eventually the shitlib feeds into a system that aggregates resources based on some sort of oppressor oppressed, or some sort of evaluation of what is meaningful in life, who needs to be lifted up, and who needs to bear the responsibility for lifting up others. I think that this is the problem that I have with liberalism that I haven't solved myself, but I'm open to questioning. That does kind of echo the Marxian, there's a hegemonic power that is ever willing to oppress human beings. And I think of that as a spiritual force, by which I mean it's just a pattern that's embedded in the world and that manifests itself in civilization. The guy I was talking to last night was talking, I think he was talking about this one philosopher, this really cranky philosopher. His writing's like a fever dream. I think you actually have one of his books. Evola, I think is his name. I can't remember his name. I think it was him. He talks about like kind of like there's this satanic force, and maybe it wasn't Evola, but there's this satanic force that has two modes to it, and they both feed into each other. One is the Luciferian, and one is the Magmon or something like that. There's one force in society that wants power in order to corrupt and to suppress people and to denigrate that which is noble about human beings. And you see that manifested in the left when it's untethered from the center or untethered from opposition, wherever that opposition may be, ends up glorifying more and more. And this is what we've seen over the last 4 to 10 years, glorifying degeneracy with regard to what Pride began as one weekend of, of celebrating degeneracy. If you look at how the Pride marches in San Francisco were performed, even The Onion back in the day would say, gays do more to damage gay rights than the right wing with one Pride march, but it started as this one day thing, and then this one weekend thing, and then it became a week, and then it became a month.
Yeah.
And now it's like a whole season of these marches.
We put the flag everywhere
and
all
the flags
the time.
All over the place, and every other day is a trans day of invisibility, remembrance, invisibility, like they get all these things, non-binary, share your pronoun day, which is interesting. Side note, AOC, Occasional Cortex, whatever her name is. She's a Brooklyn congressperson. She just took her pronouns of her bio, which is kind of an interesting. She's been the leader, the THOT leader on the left for a while now, and she's kind of backing away. Whether her handlers or her have decided that she needs to legitimize herself, and pronoun usage is off the charts. But anyway, so there's one force in society that is chaotic leaning, and that swerves towards degeneracy and swerves towards immediate gratification, polyamory, a lot of the things that we see as disgusting behavior. We see manifesting and coddled within the left. And the left has this inability, broadly speaking, whatever I mean by the left, has this inability to police its worst leaders. Whereas on the right, there's this tendency to oppress other people and to exploit others based on strength and based on exceptionalism of will. And here's where you get in this Nietzsche's idea of history being the history of strong men. And any given society doesn't really matter. The only thing that you can really judge a society on is the quality of its most excellent men. Your Napoleons, your Beethovens, the people who stand out, around which all of history seems to be, subservient to. And so both the left and the right, the nomian, which is more orderly, and the antinomian, which wants to literally destroy language and destroy sense-making process and destroy all forms of order, they are both satanic forces in the sense that they do not necessarily prize, in a Christian framework, the godlikeness or the reflection of God and the holiness and the sacredness of the individual, of any given individual soul. But why I am more toward the right, or why I push towards the right, isn't just because in this current moment, there's more interesting craziness going on there. There's more openness and creativity and potential for generating generative ideas, but because it's more orderly. And on the right, you'll have traditionalists, you'll have people who look at the world and say every society throughout time, except for this liberal society, has enshrined hierarchy by one metric or the other. And it was Rudyard who said, there's this thing called Pinkerism, where it counts the number of toilets in Africans and makes a chart out of it and say, see, look, we're progressing. Society's progressing because there's this technological innovation that was housed and promulgated in Europe for some reason. I mean, there have been other peaks of society and peaks of technology in other societies, but for some reason, because of probably contract law, which is based on the conception of the individual, which is the under foundation of liberalism, we've been able to kickstart this technological innovation. But once we kickstarted it, anybody basically can do it, as long as you have the requisite societal order and enough high IQ individuals to pull off these amazing feats. So from the right wing perspective, there is this question that questions my shitlib assumptions that you can't really judge somebody as less or more, but the fruits of those who are better, I want to adulate, and the people who have problems, or even the groups that have problems, need somehow to be patronized in the sense of shepherded and put pressure on in order to clean up their act, in order that the great minds within those groups can participate and the groups as a whole can participate. Now, that's such a difficult thing to say because you're never supposed to judge anybody based on their group characteristics. But the fact is, if you look at the data and if you look at the behavior and if you look at the weight of society, if you look at the American demographics and see who is taking more and who is giving more, there is a definite.
Well, if you want to diagnose that, then you get into how did it get to that point and why, and you start to have to take into account social factors, and now
the social engineering factors.
Now you end up on the left again. So it's this.
Wait, how do you mean?
Well,
are you saying any social engineering is coded left?
Any social engineering is coded left. I think that if you're talking about group disparities, you end up having to take into account. You cannot isolate groups just based on genetics because there's too many other variables. So if you're looking at outputs and you're having this right-wing perspective which says that if you're doing better, it must be because you are better, right? Then you have to take that apart. Why are you better? What makes this person doing better? Is it because they are better fundamentally, or have there been a whole host of social factors that, we have this nature versus nurture argument that's very hard to parse. And that does code left. I think that ends up skewing left if we're going to do that.
Well, I think nature is more right coded and nurture is more left coded in weird ways, and then they reverse when we talk about traditionalism.
I was just talking with somebody about this yesterday too. And one of my first when I left Texas, when I moved away, one of the reasons that I had always felt very alienated there was what I perceived as really close-minded and stupid, intolerant, conservative political views. And I'll give an example of why I thought that. I mean, it was things like when I was, and I've talked about this before, but when I was in college, I worked for a number of years doing volunteer work for a couple of environmental groups that were local. And the things that we were working on, it was this very specific thing, was there was a lot of development. There's famously in the San Antonio surrounding area, there's a lot of urban sprawl. There's no geographic limitation to where you can go, unlike the Puget Sound area where we've got we've got mountains on one side and water on the other, and so the density just increases, and like you see Seattle just going crazy with growth, and it just grows up, and they're just on top of each other. Well, in San Antonio, it sprawls out, and now you've been there a couple of times now, right?
Yeah.
And
Once, man.
Once have you only been there with me once? Checking memory banks.
You were two different people when we were there.
Oh, that's funny.
Just kidding.
The inside of you can see the inner part of the city. There's these vast areas that you're passing that have like old malls that are abandoned and old shopping strips that are just kind of abandoned.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the land between San Antonio and Austin is one continuous city now. Which when I was young,
it's this weird strip, and then there's stuff outside of that strip.
Yeah.
The strip has a very
It's
particular
one big shopping
shitty aesthetic. Yeah, like a strip mall.
Yeah.
And then everything, and then there's probably like actual culture on the other side.
Yeah,
of it,
but
like
it's
all the good things to do.
It's like a river
There's this
with a bunch
corridor.
of the highway is this river, and on the the banks have all this growth, and the growth is
the Nile.
It's Bed Bath and Beyond and
box
TGI
stores
Fridays and Buc-ee's and all this garbage.
Place,
and that wasn't like that when I was growing up. That's more recent. That's developed pretty much since I've left. But when I was working in this environmental group, what our focus was water, the Edwards Aquifer. So the San Antonio and the surrounding area is the drinking water is supplied by a karst aquifer that is recharged periodically when there are heavy rains, and there's long periods of drought down there, so that they really rely on these big rains to come in and the water to fall on this recharge zone in the hill country, where it just basically trickles right through the karst, the limestone, into this underground aquifer, which is then used by this very rapidly growing population in order to supply their drinking water for their plants and their lawns and things like that. There was, I don't know anymore because it's been a long time since I lived there, but we were frequently on water rationing. So there'd be certain days of the week when you couldn't water your lawn, depending on your house number. You had certain days when you were okay to use the water, certain days you couldn't. They always wanted people to report their neighbors if they were not being a water saver. Water savers stuff, the propaganda was in your schools. It was really it was so important. They told kids, turn off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth. Don't use, it was just a big deal to save water. And this is where the politics comes in. The mostly left-leaning environmental conservation people wanted to promote water saving and protect the recharge zone from an irresponsible development. The mostly right-leaning conservative business people wanted to build right over top of the recharge zone. And so this was a hotly contested area. They wanted to put in, I don't know if they ended up being successful. I think that they did. They fought for a long time to put in a PGA golf course right over top of it, where they're using all kinds of chemicals on the lawn to keep the grass really, really like artificially golf green. And those chemicals were going straight down into your drinking water. That just goes straight in. There's hardly any filtration. It just goes right in. And then they wanted to build neighborhoods and subdivisions and highways and all this impervious cover where you've got concrete now blocking the water filtration. And so the people who were on the side of the development would characterize the environmental people who were trying to stand up to the development and say, no, develop somewhere else, we need this, as these tree-hugging idiots who were just trying to save some salamander. It's like, well, the salamander is just one of many, many issues, but the main issue is quality of life and human flourishing, and the fact that if you just choose a different area to build your subdivisions and put in your golf course, we will all be able to benefit from this resource. And so there was this, like, you know what, we're rich and we're going to do what we want, and screw you, and we're going to shoot you in the foot, and it doesn't matter to us. And also, we don't even really care if it hurts us too. And so that was kind of the picture that I had of the right for a long time. And I saw the same thing reflected in the George W. Bush presidency, the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just this, we won, and you can suck it.
Yeah. Well,
know?
there's this, a lot of people have spilled a lot of ink on this realignment. The MAGA Republicans are a different stripe and a different coalition.
Yeah.
And it's reflected in Trump's cabinet and the people he's surrounding himself by. You have a lot of disaffected liberals, left me types, who are actually movers and shakers. And you have these, you have the crunchy conservatives, you have the people, the RFK Make America Healthy Again stuff,
I love that.
and
Yeah.
all these different people and so what happens to the GOP or the rhinos and or McIntyre, who I really enjoy. He's really a sharp guy. He says, that there was this phrase, and he had a little tweet, so I'm going to expand the tweet. But there's this phrase, rhino, Republican
in name only.
In name only. And he's like, no, actually, these are the Republicans. We used to call them rhinos, but no, these are the actual Republicans. These are not rightists. These are not part of our tribe. This is a part of the uniparty. These are the parts, this is the right hand of the left, which is what James calls the woke right and stuff. So there's all this Schmittian friend-enemy distinction that gets really wild. But yeah, those old line conservatives, there's a reason why all the money swung to wokeness, with the ESG crap. And now the entrepreneurial money, which is what I think Peter Thiel gets into more in his conversation with Barry Weiss that dropped a couple days ago. Peter Thiel kind of says, a lot of these Silicon Valley people broke away from the left. They broke ranks. Elon was the first guy. He provided cover for that. And then a lot of, even Bezos, who was benefiting via his relationship to the government, which allowed his internet company to not have to pay taxes for the first 10 years or whatever in order to get off the ground, undercut everybody else, the mom and pop shops and the other shops, got way ahead, got tons of money, and now is like running the government servers and stuff like that. So there's this, they're all benefiting from the machine. Elon benefits from tremendous government kickbacks, and government contracts. That's how he got so rich. And I'm not judging him for doing that either way, but there's people who benefit from the government who were going along to a certain degree. And I was just thinking about this today. Had the crazy progressive California left not transed Elon's son, what would have happened? Like he's got a blood libel against the woke. Libel? Is it blood libel?
Yeah.
It's not label.
No.
Well, whatever. He's gunning for it. And so, you wonder his part in getting Trump elected and now his role. To what degree is his role going to be important in Trump's cabinet going forward? To what degree is he going to benefit ultimately off of that? To what degree is America going to benefit? And is there a cost-benefit analysis for his involvement in that, and it depends on what frame of reference. If he's your friend or your enemy, you're going to see two different things based on that friend-enemy distinction. So I think that there's this great realignment of moneyedness that is, where you have the George W. Bush era conservatives who are like, more big business types, more screw you, what's in it for me types that kind of went coded left for a while. And now the more entrepreneurial part of the money-making process is coding right again. And you wonder, like, what is it? What is conservation, what is land management coded as now? In Washington, it's all progressive, right? But it's because we're all progressive. So it's interesting, that realignment that's going to happen. And to what degree is Trump, there's another aspect of the conversation, or shard of the conversation we had. To what degree is Trump going to be a reconciliatory force? To what degree is he going to forgive his enemies? And to what degree are the people under him not going to forgive his enemies? And to what degree will there be retribution? And to what degree does he not even have to do that? And he could be what Yarvin calls a purple emperor. somebody who's neither red nor blue, somebody who's neither left nor right, but above, transcends in some way that in-group, out-group, Schmittian friend-enemy distinction in order to get politics out of politics for enough time for government to function better.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I don't know what to think about Trump. He's not, I've never seen him as being some kind of great mastermind of any kind.
You don't take the 4D chess memes at
No,
face value?
not at all. I think he's a bit of a buffoon, but I don't know. I don't have Trump. I'm not Trump deranged. I voted for him. I thought he was the better choice.
Yeah.
But I'm also not seeing him as some kind of a great hope.
A superb man. Common ground. Super chat. Thank you very much. Seems as if part of the move to healing unity requires all of us to do some serious introspection. What are the odds?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, how much more introspection does the world need from me? Jeez.
I thought it was pretty interesting that you said that you're drawn towards the right because you like the order.
Yeah.
And you're such an unconventional person.
Are you saying I'm messy?
No, I'm not. Well, you are messy, but that's not what I'm saying.
I'm
just saying you haven't carved out a life that's been, conventional in any way.
No, not by any means. I have not lived up to the standards. That's part of the reason why I left Christianity, because I couldn't live up to those standards. And
And
I
you
already
think that
hear
you
people.
should have been forced to?
No. Well, that's one way, but there's a small part of a segment of the audience who will think in their head, well, nobody's a Christian. That's why you're a Christian, is because you admit that. Mm-hmm. And you go forward with that. But one of the reasons why I was never total shitlib or progressive or woke was because even, I guess, during the Obama election, was it the first one or the second one perhaps? You'd see, I lived in Portland, and you'd see people drive around with, I guess it was Palin, why can't I remember his name? Palin stickers, and I'd laugh at them, I'm like, why are you, they're right, backward people,
They actually drove around Portland with those stickers. Can
Yeah,
you
and Portland
somebody
wasn't
driving around Portland now with a Trump sticker.
I think, I'm sure there are people who are wearing red MAGA hats in Portland
You
at this
think
point.
so?
I don't think
my
it's
God.
beyond, I don't think it's beyond question that it's possible nowadays. I mean, you probably will get some crazy blowback for that, but so I mean, I was a shitlib, in that era, but I always kind of thought, at least when I got a little bit more mature, probably my 30s, which is kind of late in life, but probably right on track, to understand that I am an exception to the rule. And because I'm an exception to the rule in certain ways, aesthetically, in the way that I interpret information and in the way that I live my life, I need to respect the rule all the more. Insofar as I am more creative and open, and the right, or the conservative aspect of the right, tends to be more traditionalist, closed-minded, not closed, well, the opposite of openness, like trait openness. I have as an artist, I have high amount of trait openness, and that's coded left. That's definitely left, because you're playing around with ideas. You're messing around with Chesterton's fence. You're trying to figure out the code to see how things go. So, but I know that the people who are, I'm not capable of. I got to where I am in life because I wasn't capable enough to live a predictable life, to get a career, like I could never understand the public school system. I don't have the same feelings about the public school system as you do, but like, it just wasn't for me. It just, I always clashed with it. I was really terrible at doing homework. I was terrible of like living this really ordered existence. And then when I grew up, like I'd get jobs, but I would have the job to pay the bills, but my real care was my art or like something else. And I was very fortunate to find some amount of traction on the internet later on in life to do some sort of creative thing. But I rely, insofar as I'm successful as an artist, I rely on people who can show up and do these works and pay attention to things and go to their job inside and out and pay attention to the plumbing and care about the orderliness of society. So
you need to be on the margin of something that's orderly.
they're my audience, so you want to delight them in some way, in a way. That's why Hollywood kind of tanked, because it tanked when it started disrespecting its audience. It started to disrespect.
I started to try to teach them constantly.
Well, there was always there's always an element of the pedagogical inside of art. There's always some moral to any given story. You can't get away from that. But once they started treating Trump supporters, and that was the extremity of it, but conservatives before then, as subhuman troglodytes, flyover state, people that they disdain, that they openly disdain, that's an aspect of the shit lib that is like running away from wokeness. Yeah, that smugness, and like running away, finding themselves in shantytown with everybody else, and then still trying to have heirs without that institution around them anymore, around people who don't care, who are playing around with ideas and say, okay, maybe fascism isn't a bad idea. Let's test it out. Let's look at it. I'm not going to be scared of being racist. I'm not allergic to being racist. Say people in this shantytown, and then you're like, well, what does that actually mean? And you're like, okay, well, I don't want to be racist, so I'm not going to engage with that rhetoric. But I'm not going to be allergic to that rhetoric as some sort of ultimate red flag, because we're not in a state where that really actually scales or makes sense. These people don't have any power. They're outside of the power structure, and they admit that. And then through admitting that, they're able to play around with ideas. And then I go to those discourse realms, which I have done in the wake of the woke right scandal with Daryl Cooper, and going on Orange Show and going and talking to the DR, the dope right, as I want to call it, and saying, all this kind of Nazi coded memes that you guys have that has a purpose in your discourse to get the shit libs out of your way and to scare off the people who can't handle playing around with ideas. It has its place, and I understand it for what it is. You guys are having fun. I don't want to piss on your fun, but the only ideas that matter in what you guys are doing are ideas that actually feed into prosperity, and ideas that are going to be cleaned up this rhetoric.
So that's you being a shit lib.
I think it's me playing the practical politic game, which is what they want to do. If you want to politic, you have to scale your message, or your message is going to escape from you. And so I think that it is not so much shit lib, because I'm not saying you need to talk to the I don't want to say her name. You need to talk to the shit lib and me. I'm not putting myself front and center and saying this is distasteful. I'm saying there are people who would benefit from your ideas were those ideas not attached with all this unnecessary humor stuff. Like the humor is fine for me, and I'm not, I have to be careful with myself because I have a centrist audience. I'm that which is I am the true centrist, that which is run over in the middle of the road over and over and over again. I am the dropped iPhone of the Obama administration. And I got the shit beat out of me, and now I'm like, you know what? Maybe a little bit of rough and tumble order is what we need here, but yeah.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting.
I think there's something about the shit lib that still is attached. Like their ego is still attached to this prim and proper 90s order where we could like laugh at the racist joke, but really not, but I'm not racist, kind of thing. That's just one example, but there's something where they put themselves in the middle of it and are not willing to really examine the truth of power. And that is both left coded and right coded. When you start to examine power as a fact, not as something that's inherently corrupting, but a fact of political order, then you're either going to start to analyze it and become left or become right. That's where you stop being a centrist. The centrist still supposes that rational discourse and a disdain for power is somehow politically viable, and it hides all that power.
Well, call me centrist.
Yeah, it hides all the power.
Something you said I think was really interesting about left, about openness being left coded, which it has been.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's still the case. I wonder if that holds up now. Because I really kind of see this as like, it's not a line here from right to left or left to right, but rather kind of a curve that bends around in the back where these two things sort of meet and their process is very the same. It's kind of like how all of the anti-racist BS about, what was the most recent one I saw was a therapy exam, like a licensure exam that somebody sent some of the the actual snippets from it.
Yeah.
One of them said, black people don't like you to look them in the eye. So don't look your black clients in the eye. I mean, it was like something this ridiculous. And they've got like the whiteness is showing up on time and being good at math and doing all your work or something like that. So that meets right up to the right-wing stuff about white supremacy. I mean, it basically is the same thing. It's just an inversion of that thing, right? It's yes, we're just going to, code it differently and talk about it differently, but we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
So I wonder if left-wing really still is open if in today's modern age, because it seems very closed.
So there's this brilliant guy. I mean, he's not like conventionally brilliant because he's just a really, really smart Jewish dude named Jonathan Haidt. He's written several books that are very impactful on a lot of discourse. One is like The Rider and His Elephant, I think it is, or The Righteous Mind.
The Righteous Mind, yeah.
Where he does a bunch of political experiments. It's Righteous Mind, and there's one other. Not the Lukianov book, but another one. Same era as The Righteous Mind. But, he does people who identify as left and identify as right, and then he charts their moral traits. And, like this, and he basically makes an argument that people who are more conservative or right-leaning or right-identifying have their moral compass has more points of weight to it. Like they weight loyalty and purity and fairness kind of equally, whereas oh, we got a package. Whereas the left rates, I think it's equality and fairness really high, and the rest are really low, like loyalty and stuff. But then you see, and I'm reading them, like that's really interesting. But what about Evergreen? Because there was tons of purity, tons of loyalty stuff, and I was thinking, well, maybe the left had
maybe
suppressed.
The way those are being questioned is
maybe
wrong.
the left overemphasized fairness and suppressed all of these other traits, and then they come out in the name of fairness in a toxic form.
That's interesting.
Purity spirals, openness.
It might
closeness.
be the metric too. I mean, if you're asking it in a way that doesn't trigger the right. It doesn't seem the same. I mean, you write your exams or your surveys based on things that are going to trigger a meaningful response in someone. So I wonder if there's a problem with the measuring of that, because you're absolutely right.
But I have an idea, and it might be argumentative, and you might be really offended by it.
Oh no.
But I think that the horseshoe theory that the centrist likes to trot out, is like the same thing as being non-binary. It's like I'm above. Like those two, and then you make your own binary by saying I'm not participating in power dynamics. I'm participating in propriety. And propriety, the proper way to do things, is a way of masking hegemony. You're saying I'm actually superior to those over there. So you're making the friend-enemy distinction. And you're putting yourself, I'm the one who decides the exception, not those left and the right people who are tribal. But you're being tribal. I think that the same psychology is operating.
No, I think I see your point. I'm not offended in the least by that. I think that's really interesting, actually. And I think there's something to it. And I think that in a way, and I'll just use my own experience of this as an anecdote, because I know it's just one experience.
No, I mean, if you have enough anecdote, it's data. In this house. In this house, we believe anecdote is data.
Sure.
Well, in this marriage, we believe that her opinion is truth.
And that freedom markets are mandatory.
Yeah.
So when I was young and I saw the thing with 9/11 and I watched the Bush-Cheney administration, and I really saw that as just horrific. And it was my first real encounter of a political scandal. I mean, it was so egregious.
They had they would put up chain link fence and say this is a free speech zone. You remember that? It was so insane, like how totalitarian. Then the NSA comes and we're going to grab your junk now, and you can't bring more than 2 ounces of fluid and all that.
We used to be able to walk our friends all the way to the airplane gate.
We used to be a
society.
Remember that? Yeah.
We could walk people into the airport, and I had a friend whose kids would fly back and forth because their dad lived in a city a little further away, so they'd fly back and forth for visitation. She could walk the kids right up and pick them up and drop them off. And then after this happened, we have to get completely wrecked by the stupid TSA.
You hate it.
I hate it
You get
so
you
much.
get shows
I hate
so
it so
hard,
much. Yeah.
and the guys who do it to you, or the women, they're so nice to you, and you're like, oh, I
There
watch
was
you.
one that wasn't, and I was so mad. And ever since then, I've had my guard up. But anyway, it's I hate it so much because I remember what it was like before.
Yeah.
They put that on us,
Yeah.
and I saw all of that as, in my mind, the Republicans, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I made that horribly cringy joke that I told you about, where I said
Was it a joke?
it was,
it was kind of a joke.
Yeah, a cocktail party, and I'm like,
This is
yeah,
like peak
yeah.
shit lib. So if
Peak
you want to
shit
know
lib.
what shit lib is, tell them the joke.
That joke.
You're at a
I just
cocktail
said
party.
this the other day to a friend. I said this to Karen King, and I'm going to put that episode up this week. So everything I say is redundant. But I said Republicans think Democrats have bad ideas, but Democrats think Republicans are bad people because they are. And that was so smug. It was so stupid. It makes me cringe really hard. I'm like blushing thinking about this. But that I had the Patriot Act and the frickin' the bombing and the destruction of Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
The way that our concern about the war was turned into, oh, you just hate our troops.
Yeah.
You're anti-American.
Yeah.
The advent of the TSA.
We're the same exact age, plus or minus 10 days. We both charted.
We
really.
saw that.
Yeah,
so I saw that, and I plugged that into, if you want to go with your metaphor, I plugged it into the binary system, and I became a Democrat because that was wrong. And then we went through COVID.
Well, we went to Obama first, but go on.
Yeah, the latter half of the Obama years, which to me opened my eyes a little bit, but not fully, not enough. And then I saw Bernie, and then what Hillary did to Bernie at the DNC convention.
Yeah.
And that still didn't fully open my eyes. And then we went through COVID.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, oh, hell no, we're doing that same shit, but worse. And now it's the Democrats doing it. And so if you want to call me non-binary, I'm non-binary on politics, because now
you're anti-authoritarian.
I'm telling you, I see this as it's not a content issue like, oh, the Democrats have better ideas than the Republicans, or the Republicans have better ideas than the Democrats. It's a mistrust of this governmental system.
Yeah.
And I am, yes, anti-authoritarian.
Yes, you are.
And I see the problems as being a part of our political structure. And so when I vote for a politician, like in this case with this presidential election, and I vote for Trump, I'm not going, oh, yay, we're going to get the Republicans back in and they're going to save us from the evil Democrats. I'm just trying to shift the balance because I see that the balance has gone too far over here.
Yeah.
And I'm voting against the social justice authoritarianism, the DEI authoritarianism, and all of this bizarre gender crap, and many other things that I see.
So I think you are
medical authoritarianism.
I don't think you can be. For a woman, you're probably going to end up as right as possible, but as a woman, you're not going to be able to be right, just in your bones.
Feminists were right about you, Benjamin.
They were. You said that one day.
Yeah.
In earnest.
I was mad at
it was hilarious. Yeah. You were doing the haka, the Karen, the Karen. You're like, the feminists will write about you. I'm like, what? I was just playing a video game with your son. What's going on? Anyway.
Oh my
God. I think if you wanted to increase your honesty.
What?
Well, with what you actually believe, really question why you believe what you believe. I would say you're kind of a right-leaning libertarian, but you can't really admit yet that you want to be right-leaning because you do know that authority is the problem. Authoritarianism is a problem.
I'm not right-leaning.
But you also know that order is mandatory for civilization.
I am also somebody who's always rejected convention. I hate schools. I want to see the mandatory school system disbanded.
Yeah.
I do not
so
have a strong
what I'm saying is,
order.
What I'm saying is you're libertarian.
Flourish.
You're libertarian.
Well, a little bit, but I do see some need for certain market controls. So I'm not a full libertarian.
Yeah. So there's different outcomes for this. There's some sort of
I don't think we need to invent a new word for it. I think it just is liberalism. But right now we use liberal. It's a misnomer the way it's applied to left-wing authoritarians. We call them libs and liberals. There's no liberalism in that. It's, I want to do what I want to do, and you have to say it's okay. You actually have to. You have to think it's okay. It's not okay. It's not enough for you just to tolerate it. We need to get into your head and make you think it's okay too, because it's not okay for you to have different thoughts or to talk about it differently. And there's nothing liberal about that.
I just don't see I don't exactly understand it, but I intuitively grok that there are assumptions. There's a liberal blind spot, and it happens to have something to do with the proper exercise of authority. And I think that in a true federalism is the best you're going to get. By which I mean people can opt into different localized authority structures and between those authority structures, there's some sort of collective will or collective organization to protect them against other coalitions. Like the only way for us to compete with China is to have some sort of cohesive thing. But if you look at how Europe has coagulated into the European Union, I don't necessarily want that, and I don't think that's terribly good. I mean, other than they have less chemicals in their food, everything else is screwed, right? They're all of their innovative class is fleeing because they're being taxed to hell, and they're all coming to the United States, and so we're benefiting of that. Either that or they're going to China. So there's an elite capital. There is an elite. There's an aristocracy of excellence. Those people need to be rewarded. There's also there's a portion of society that needs to be kind of tended and taken care of and employed in certain ways that they can't make high functioning decisions. And there's some sort of rulership class that articulates the plebeians and articulates the aristocracy into a whole. And I don't know how big that can scale, but we all want a certain kind of aesthetic order that we live in. We want a society where nobody's telling us what to do, but everybody's kind of making the same choices we are.
Yes, that's
right?
true. That's
and I
true.
think that is what you're going to want to do is have different kind of states that have a different kind of brand or aesthetic order that people
like
opt into.
what you're saying,
but you
about
have to
that.
have order. You have to have a ruler, and it can't be democracy. And you might have a good oligarchy to a certain degree, and you might or might not have either a great or a terrible monarchy.
So I like the decentralization idea, and the federalist model makes a lot more sense to me in that regard, because it's a loosening of centralized constraint on a lot of things and an allowing for smaller models of
Variations.
variation in, like, what's the social contract here?
Yeah.
What does this look like? But one of the things that I keep noticing so much in a lot of the conversations that people are having online around politics over the last few years is this real sense of urgency from every single direction to control how other people are doing things. It's like the zeitgeist is, we are in a crisis and we have to do this. Like, we must control this or change this, or it's everybody coming at the model of how all things should be done together and having disagreements. People disagreeing about the rules of engagement. How should society be ordered? And I think that it's actually a projection of an internal crisis that a lot of people are having as we've become less and less spiritual and more mechanically and scientifically inclined. Mm-hmm. And, the Jordan Peterson line about cleaning your room is so relevant, that if people would just go back to ordering their own life and starting with their own spiritual life, like, what does life mean to me? What's my own existential or spiritual understanding? Then if each person really were to come back to focusing on righting themselves and righting their relationships, making things, moving into all of their encounters with intention and with an orientation toward love and harmony and toward flourishing from the smallest scale outward, then a lot of these problems would really resolve. I mean, it's like you talk about this you want to live in a place where there's aesthetic harmony, but we're not having that drummed into us from above, but we instead act it out together. I think that there's a giant spiritual crisis, and that's really what's at the heart of trying to tell everybody else how they should be doing life. But perhaps that's a poorly articulated new thought to be putting out there.
Yeah, no, I see one aspect of the new right, or the dope right, is this, there's this electiveness to it. These people, some of them more than others, are okay or not allergic to authoritarianism as much as others. And it's not so much as wanting their will be done, but seeing that a singular will of a certain composition can really get a lot done. And that can be interpreted all the way from the Yarvanite tech startup CEO Elon Musk model to a more kind of medieval coded warrior king, conqueror, and not conqueror is like I'm going to go and shed blood, but like a person with great authority and personal charisma that unites people willfully into a struggle for a better existence, a struggle for propriety. And the masculine strength, the ability to lead, cannot be ascertained without first learning the ability to follow, what it is to be a follower. And I think that is one aspect of the people who I am of, the shitlibs, that I see as one of their greatest weaknesses. They are allergic to being followers, but they want to be led, and they're allergic to leadership because they don't want to follow. But there's a proper way in which life is constituted, that society is ordered, where there is leadership and followers.
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with that. And another thing, I know we need to wrap it up because we've been talking for like a long time now, but the DR, I kind of just can't with these people, because it's just it seems like every time I poke into there is a hotbed of misogyny. And I'm sorry, but I'm so sick of the men versus women thing. I'm so tired of it. We're complementary. We overlap in a lot of ways. It's complicated. There are differences. It's a complicated argument to have, because it's hard to talk about things in a really general way when everything is experienced on the individual level. And that problem keeps resurfacing over and over as we try to have sociological conversations about people and culture that basically distill from an aggregate back down to the individual, because it just doesn't work that way. And these DR people, anyway, I don't want to go into specifics, but you always see this like, well, it's like men have been beaten down, so we need to raise men back up, and women, screw them and get them back in the kitchen, and they shouldn't have opinions. And that's just such garbage. I'm sorry. I'm so tired of the war of the sexes. Do you not agree? Is it not?
I think that a large part of that aesthetic that turns you off is actually coded to get women out of the conversation.
Well, thank you very much. That's what I'm responding to. If they don't want women in the conversation, then
I brought that up with them.
I bring that up with them all the time. There's a major flaw in what they're trying to do.
Maybe not, but
why should there be right versus left, and the right ends up being the manosphere? Why should that? How is that valid?
Well, I would disagree with you. I think that the dope right is masculine coded, and they're not allergic to having conversations with red pillars, but they're not all red pillars by any means. But you hear
the kind of women who are in those groups too are just like the sorts of women who are engaging in intra-sex competition by putting other women down in order to give themselves a prized position within the
maybe not. I wouldn't ascribe to Mary Harrington, who would be
No,
somebody
I
who
like
is
Mary
actually, interestingly enough, like a Marxian to her core in her analysis, but she's still aesthetically attracted to the masculinism of the right. I think that there is expressions that go overboard on both female-centric and male-centric discourses. And the bagging on the opposite sex is acceptable, but it's exclusionary, and any ideas that are of a necessity or of that serve proper flourishing for society need to be loosened from that misogyny or misandry.
Yes,
Coded.
absolutely.
So
Because the misandry is part of what turns me off so hard about the social justice left. I mean, this whole like, oh, we don't need to hear any more white male voices or even male voices. You know, we need to hear from people who are in the TQ, you know, at least the LGB. If they're a little bit male, they have to be this special kind of male, or else they're. I have no patience for that either. I think that's ridiculous.
I think that there's a lot more going on in the dope right than just misogyny. And a lot of the people who are signaling criticism specifically of the longhouse or the female-coded current
which I would
structure
argue is the
are
beta
going
male
to
coded structure myself, but
which that analysis does fold into red pill stuff, which does fold into
which also comes back to the follower argument. I think too many people are followers, and that's part of the problem.
be that as it may.
Okay.
A lot of these guys are married with families and stellar fathers and husbands.
That's good. I'm glad for them.
So maybe some of the rhetoric.
There was a thing that recently happened, and without saying anything at all about it, but where a woman was being accused of having a past that involved doing pornography. But the people who were most vociferous in calling it out and bagging on this woman were putting her down really horribly while sharing stills and while boasting about watching it and recognizing it. And so this kind of thing, it's this two-facedness of this. Like, we can put women in this box, but we can also enjoy that they're in this box while shitting on them for being for being women. Well, and so that's the kind of thing I'm sort of talking about. I think we may be going off the rails.
No.
So,
but let me just try to make my point.
Okay.
And it is kind of a rebuff of what you're saying.
That's fine.
And you see this on the internet. It takes a high degree of vigilance to strain legitimate from illegitimate voices. And just because people are having the same conversation doesn't mean that they're all agreeing with each other.
Right.
There are nuances to that particular thing, which didn't just resolve down to her participating for 7 or 8 years in the pornography industry, but the right, people who are making inroads, these think tanks that are making inroads to actual institutional capture for the right, by the right, of the right, are overlooking long-standing right-wing voices for more centrist, even anti-Trumpian voices,
right,
and are consorting with people of not right-leaning lives.
Is that an effort to be compromising?
I just think that the pornography was an unfortunate, extremely graphic expression of a deeper problem that the right has with these institutions that use their ideas, and then hire and staff themselves with shitlibs.
Okay.
And then are just go through this whole process of...
So it goes back to the rhino.
It's just basically trending rhino, which is an open question whether or not you can actually be legitimate ever as a rightist, because the institution itself will select for shitlibs or at most left me people. And which makes me wonder, is the right at all legitimate? Because if they can't get legitimacy, then are they legitimate?
Well, and then coming back to what is even conservative? What is conservative about a lot of these things?
Yeah. So I would just caution against taking the whole dope right and taking the worst possible assholes.
So what you're saying is that I'm performing that same collectivist flattening and reducing.
Well, I would say that if the discourse turns you off and the aesthetics turn you off, I totally understand, and I won't put anything past you. It goes back to where I started in this very conversation about, like, there's a left, and I'm like, I just don't want to, like, look at this stuff, you know? Yeah. So I don't, which is just like, so I don't understand it, you know? I'm fine with, like, looking at, like, crazy ass Destiny clips. You're like, wow, okay. Well, that was particularly virulent and violent, and he wouldn't stand a chance going after the people that he wants to squash. But anyways, I think it's really easy for us to do that. And because we only have so much bandwidth to filter out the conversation, that if you go over the dope right, and you see a lot of critique of gynocracy, and then right next door to that is a lot of just open, just bagging on women, and right next to that is just open loathing of women, then and none of them are standing up. None of the voices that you would find more respectable are spending time putting down people who are saying things that you find reprehensible. You're saying basically everybody thinks the same here. And so that is a definite problem. And the liberals, the respectable shit libs, have a leg up because they just seem more respectable. And they're just like, I'm just asking questions. Why do people have to be so rude? Why are all these authoritarians bagging on my tea? Wasn't our previous order just right? Were things just right, you know? And so you're more aesthetically comfortable with that. I don't know. I don't know. But I love you, and I love our audience, and I hope that our conversation today has been of some use to someone else. It's
probably pretty maddening to some people.
Maddening. What have you been cooking lately?
Cooking? Yeah. Well, the girls gave me a sourdough starter, my daughters. And
she's turning into a white woman, and she can't even help it. Sourdough.
I haven't made any sourdough bread.
She doesn't drink pumpkin lattes, though, but she does have this kind of pumpkin latte adjacent.
I need to warm that up.
It's bulletproof coffee.
Cold. I do like bulletproof coffee. I've been making sourdough crackers a lot.
You've been doing it every day.
Just about, or every other day. So I discovered that if you have a sourdough starter, you have to discard some of your starter every time you feed it. So you feed it with new flour and water. And every time you do that, you have to take a little bit of it out. And if you just mix in a little bit of oil and some seasonings, you can bake it in the oven, and it makes the most amazing crackers. So you just mix with oil, salt, and spices, and you spread it real thin on a cookie sheet, cook at 325. And cook for 10 minutes. This
is the part where you're still experimenting. You're trying to make it a cracker.
Yeah, it's sometimes it comes out really good, and sometimes it's like, well, that's a little chewy still, or so I haven't got the timing quite right. Yeah, they're really good. And crackers are stupid expensive, like organic crackers that are not full of chemicals and weird stuff. It's stupid how expensive they are. So this is just really nice because they're so easy. 325 for 10 minutes, and then you score it. And then you put it back in the oven for another 20 minutes, and that, play with the timing a little bit, but they're pretty good.
Somebody out there is going to be really benefiting from this advice, but will not know what you mean by score. What do you mean by score?
Oh, like use a little tool. You want to get my little tool? I have a little pasta roller thing that I use to cut them so that they're in little rectangles, so that after they're baked, you don't have to crack them. They're pre-cracked. That's what I use. And another thing, I guess, I made another batch of chili sauce, which I don't know if people know how easy it is to make your own chili sauce. So I've been doing this for years. But you make I get hot pepper mix. I cut off the stems, and then I cram them into a jar with a couple of cloves of garlic. And so it'll be like jalapenos, cayenne, habanero, serrano,
And with what? With water or something?
With brine. And the brine is 1 tablespoon salt to 1 cup of water. And so then you cover the peppers with brine, and then you weight it so that they stay submerged.
Oh, that's what that thing is. Okay, it's a weight. Okay,
yeah. And then you leave them on the counter for about a week, and they get nice and sour. Make sure there's no mold growing. If there is, scoop it off, and it's fine. Usually it doesn't take over. The yeast that's growing in them is not really happy with mold. So then drain off some of the brine and blend them up into a paste. And we keep it in the fridge year round. It lasts forever in the fridge. So I just, I do a couple batches in the summer and fall. And then they last until next year in the spring, I guess, when I do another batch. So that's what I'm cooking.
And that's what she's cooking.
Mm-hmm. What are you cooking? You're going to show your game.
Yeah, I'm playing a game.
Out.
So I think we showed off Root, and we were playing Root, me and the boys, and then Leslie played Root. It was hilarious. We should tell the game someday.
Oh my gosh.
It was so funny. But Root is made by Leader Games, and the game designer is Cole Worley, and the art is by Kyle Farron. And in 2020, they released this game, Oath, which is this kind of role play.
What is this guy? He looks like a
Oh, that's
funny.
the Cloud Dude.
Oh, Cloud Dude.
So basically, it's about king making. So there's 4 or 5 people, 3, 4 or 5 people. It's really hard to play with 2. I've been playing single, multi-handed, like solo. I've been playing 4-handed solo and kind of getting into the perspective of each one of the players. And they're all kind of vying for a dominance position. And they're trying to win in these different dominance positions. And the game's about an hour and a half to 2 hours, depending. And at the end of it, whatever happens, whoever wins, the whole board, the whole world gets rearranged for the next game. And so like the game takes on this momentum where these characters are going, they're rising and they're falling, or you can think about it as like these clans rising and falling over time, and the world kind of adapts to it. So it's kind of fiddly in the mechanics, but if you treat it as kind of like a war game, but with heavy role-playing elements or heavy story elements. And at the end of every game, you're supposed to write a journal or an entry, what happened in that history. And so the Fox clan or the guy who's leading the Fox clan, so far it's from his perspective who's rising and falling, and he's like making fun of everybody. He's got his own character and stuff. So I've just been playing this weekend. It's really good. There is some barrier to entry to it. They say it's not for everyone. I can understand why it's not for everyone. You really have to, in a lot of Cole Worley's games, you have to rethink your relationship to the game and rethink your relationship to winning. And there's this king-making aspect where you can say, where you're supposed to kind of go for the win, but you can't win if you're targeted, and you can't win without targeting. So you have to kind of do this really uneasy table talk, political, like everybody's kind of eyeing each other. And so the game itself has this disembodying aspect to it, where it really brings to the foreground this concept in game design, or ludology. Look that up. Where the game is a magic circle. Okay. And this is something I've been working on with the boys, where like when you say, why did you attack me? It's like, no, the cats and the rats are battling. You know, like, and I say, don't bicker, fight through the game. Like you really have to kind of just play the role. And that was what was so funny about the game of Root that you played. You got really, really, really frustrated playing the little communist rabble rousers because they could never get ahead. And you stood up on and the way that they get ahead is by spreading sympathy. And halfway through the game, you just blew up. You're like, no, nothing happens. I do one thing and I just have to do it again. I just have to do it again and nothing happens. And we all like, you're spreading sympathy. And we're like, oh, well, we'll help you. Don't worry about it. We'll help you. And then you ended up winning the game. And without really realizing it, like the game kind of possessed you in this way.
Oh, wow.
And the magic circle, you couldn't distinguish.
Yeah.
It was taking a long time. You're like, why is this taking so long?
Yeah.
You know, like you thought it was going to be a quick game. So there's a lot of different pressures in that stuff. But Cole Worley really designs games to test our relationship to fairness and really kind of rethink our relationship to what a game can be. And so entering into it, you have to kind of participate and reorient yourself to winning condition and even to what is fun.
So instead of an age range on the game, it has like an emotional maturity range.
Yeah, it's kind of emotional maturity range or
Yeah.
like an ability to control yourself range. Yeah.
That's pretty cute.
Yeah. So, but I'm really enjoying his game designs. I need to kind of get out of my head and kind of find a gaming group, kind of closer to home to do that. But I really enjoy. I don't know why I'm so into board games. I'm hoping something will come of it eventually.
Well, a lot is coming of it. You're learning a lot. You're teaching the boys a lot.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, there's benefits.
We have
to
a
it.
lot of fun with it.
We do have a lot
play
of fun.
games
Yeah,
many
once a
nights
week.
a week.
At least twice a week as a family.
Yeah, at least twice a week as a family. You and I play games together,
Regularly,
and you and the boys play a lot.
Yeah, so there's that. I mean, there's the community aspect. There's the like learning how to count aspect of it. But like as an art form.
Yeah.
Like, what am I?
You want to design a game sometime?
I think that there are lessons to be learned about game theory by actually not just talking about game theory on the internet, and the evolutionary biology just so story manner, but actually kind of understanding what makes something fun and understanding everything that we talked about tonight with regard to politics. Does have some aspect of it that we are playing a game, and a game isn't something that we should look down on any more than myth. We there for a long time, until people got into Jung and then Peterson repopularized Jung, people would use myth as purely a derogatory, like this is a false, untrue thing. It's like, no, a myth is something that shows you a pattern of reality, and a game or a toy reflects reality. It's a mirror of the world in and of itself. It's a distillation of some truth. And when you're interacting with the game and you start to get angry or excited, like it's engaging with reality in some way. And I would even say, and I don't want to have this conversation on camera or something, I think video games have a large pool of possibility in teaching us about.
Look how much better our society is since people have started playing so many video games.
Elon Musk is way up high on those leaderboards, but anyways, you have a very strong thing. Okay, so wrapping up,
that's not going to show up, is it?
we're going to Sunday, November 17th, Seattle Public Library. April Morrow, Susan Kielman, Amy Sousa, Kara Dansky, Camille Keifel, and Carol Danseru are having a Standing Up for Women and Girls in Washington.
That's today.
And I'm going to be in the crowd waving at these fine specimens.
Benjamin.
Because the feminists were right about me. You can take that to your pony and spank it. Anyway, so I think we should shut down our episode tonight.
Sounds good.
We will be, I guess we'll try to stream over Thanksgiving weekend. Is it weekend after next?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So maybe we'll hit you guys
Have
there.
a Thanksgiving special.
Yeah. Follow Leslie Elliott at the Radical Center, and J. Leslie Elliott on Twitter. And then I'm at Benjamin A. Boyce on Twitter. You guys know I'll put links in the description. Y'all have a good night.
Bye.
Bye. Press the button. Where's the button? Here's the button. Feed the kitty. Feed the kitty.